Have a look at this amazing result. Listening 12, reading 12. Amazing. Writing 11, speaking 11. This was the result of our student, and the job they did at reading is just amazing. It's very unusual to get a 12 out of 12 in reading. However, there are always strategies and tips with which you can get there. Today, we're going to discuss exactly that, and we're tackling part 4 in this video. So listen up closely because all these tips are very important. Even tips is too basic of a word to define what I'm going to explain to you in this video. Point number 5 that I'm going to tell you is super important and it's super surprising, so stick around until the end. You'll be surprised by what I'm going to tell you. Now, this is part 4. Passage on the left, questions on the right. We already know that the first 5 questions, 5 or 6, whatever you get, are the most important because when you attempt these, you spend about 70 to 80% of your time here. Then you go into the next section, which is easier, and you can spend only 20 to 30% of your time there. For that second section, we're not discussing that in this video. We're discussing the first section because the first section is where all the hardest questions are. And for the first section, you need to understand that you need to read the whole passage. And I do not mean read the passage first and then the questions. No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is when you look at question 1, find the keywords here, find the specific things you're looking for, go into the passage, read where that is, find that paragraph, read that paragraph, and answer this question. Then do the same thing with question 2, 3, and so on. But when you are done with all these questions, you should have been done with the entire passage. So while you pick pieces per question, all those pieces together would mean that before you jump into the next section after question number 5, before that, at this point, the entire passage should be read. The reason being, once you go into section 2, you should not be looking at the passage again. Section 2 requires you to answer based on your prior knowledge and understanding of the passage. So here, in the first 5 questions, if you have not read the whole passage, you're probably taking some shortcuts and you're probably not understanding the concept correctly. Make sure that you have really read everything in these first 5 questions. The next thing is, as you know, this is a debate. This is usually opposing views. It's always, hey, this is a really good thing, this is positive, but then there's always something like nevertheless, and then that's where the idea changes and it becomes negative. As soon as you realize that, you will be in a better spot. So once you are, again, going to the questions, going to the passage, going back and forth and answering, around the second or third question, you should have the answer to this question. The question is, what does one stance say and what does the other stance say? If you can answer that and you can say, well, you know, this person was supporting climate change and he was saying that it's a good thing, it's actually going to help us, and the other person was saying, no, it's completely wrong, we will all be struggling with climate change and plants will die and so on. If you can understand the debate and around the second or third question, you can confidently answer that this is the side from each person, then that means your concept is now good and you'll be getting the answers to all the other questions. That concept development is important and that comes from reading and understanding what they mean in terms of their stance. If you're just reading for quick keywords and quick answers, you will not get the concept, and that's important to understand. Now, strategy number 3 is having a look at something like question number 5. I picked this because this is where it's a little tricky. Question number 5 says, how is sustainable architecture portrayed in terms of social impact? So this is such a weird sentence that, because we don't usually say portray and these things in daily life, and this will give you a hard time in understanding what exactly you have to look for. So I want to explain this to myself in the simplest terms. It says, how is sustainable architecture? So architecture that is sustainable, that lasts for a long time, okay, that one. Portrayed in terms of social impact. How is it shown, or how is it viewed? Instead of portrayed, I'm going to use easier words. In terms of social impact, in terms of how it affects the society. or maybe how it affects the poverty or the politicians or social organizations. Things like that would be social impact. I am trying to not only simplify what this question says, but I'm also trying to understand the concept behind it, because it's very hard or very rare that the exact same words would be said in the passage. So I'm looking for the concept. If I understand the concept, anything related to those words, I will be able to spot quickly. So I'm looking for the concept here. Once again, I'm thinking, okay, they're asking, what is the view of people? Like, how do people view this? How is it portrayed? So how do people think about sustainable architecture in terms of the social things it does, like how it deals with poverty, crime, and those kinds of things? So, okay, that's what the question is asking. I've simplified it to myself, kind of explain it to myself in my own words. Now it's going to be super easy for me to find out where the passage mentions that, and then I would read for the answer. So make sure to always do that with questions, not only question 5, but with all questions, to make it simple. But I have a challenge here for you. Once you do what I said, then you would be able to locate. This was the paragraph in this reading sample passage where the answer is located, right here in this paragraph. What do you think the answer is to question number 5? Read this paragraph and answer. This is the drop down, and these are the options for question 5. Answer in the comments, and I'm curious to see what you say. Okay, now let's jump into strategy number 4. Which are your obvious keywords? Look, question number 5 had no obvious keywords. It had a concept that could have been easily paraphrased. That's where it's tricky. However, if you see question number 4, it mentions challenge. Challenge is easy to paraphrase. I mean, you can say challenge or hurdle or problem, but it will be around those terms. It might be the cons, the disadvantages, the negatives. Those words would be easy to spot. You're just looking for something synonymous to challenge. So here I don't have to do a lot of thinking compared to question 5. Similarly, in question number 3, it says, what does the passage suggest about the link between architecture and culture? So this is simple. It's the entire passage. This kind of question is very similar to what is the overall theme of the passage? Those kinds of things. When it says that, I will simply leave this question, do the rest, and at the end, when I have really read the entire passage, I'm going to answer question number 3. I don't have to look for this specifically because it's an overall idea. So cross it, just do it at the end. Plus, remember nouns. Nouns would be titles, names, article names. Those things would never be paraphrased. Yes, with names they might use surnames. They might have a full name here and a surname here. They might use abbreviations, but that name itself will not change. So for nouns, if you see them in your questions, those are also good keywords to remember because you can easily go back and find them. You don't have to work hard and paraphrase every time. So there are questions where you do work hard and paraphrase, and some questions which are easier to spot. Keep that in mind. With that said, let me bring you to my secret strategy here. And this is where I was mentioning something that you'll be surprised with. For this, we're looking at question number 3. What does the passage suggest about the link between architecture and culture? Okay, now assume you don't have time, you don't understand the vocab here, and you didn't even find the answer, where this answer was in the passage. All you have is the drop down, and you're panicking and you have to find an answer. Now that is a bad situation to be in. Obviously, it's better you see the passage, you get the exact answer, you come back and answer. However, let's say we run into the situation. We're not understanding. We don't have the vocab. We got to find a solution. A workaround right here is having a look at the options and determining which one would make the most sense based on the question that is being asked. The question is asking about the link between architecture and culture. So you can kind of imagine that there must be a link. Architect is usually related to culture. It depicts different cultures. So something like they're completely independent wouldn't make sense logically. And something like completely, solely, those things are extreme words. They're usually just there to kind of confuse you and to also show that it's too extreme and can't fit the answer. So something like architecture solely shapes culture, like nothing else shapes culture? No, that's an odd idea. Option C, cultural shifts affect architectural trends. Yeah, I mean, even these days, if you see our culture is becoming more modern, that changes how buildings are made, and that affects architectural trends. This is something I can determine from daily life too. I feel that that makes sense. And D, only historical architecture reflects culture. That again is too extreme, firstly, because it says only. This is the only thing, nothing else. So that extreme wording, again, tells me this is probably not the answer. And thinking about this logically, historical architecture only that reflects culture, like nothing else reflects culture? No, that doesn't make sense. So logically, I would pick C as the answer, and guess what? C was the actual answer. Now again, you want to go to the passage, find it logically, find it organically, but if you're stuck with time and you have to resort to something like this, you can't understand the vocab, use logical deduction, and that should help you reach the right answer. And guys, that is it for our video today. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and check out our CELPIP self-paced course in the description for the best marks. Thank you, and take care.